Let's first go to Waitangi, where Labour Leader Chris Hipkins is standing by for his weekly chat. Chris, good morning. Kia ora.
Kia ora, good morning, Ryan.
It looks like a beautiful one there.
It looks like it's going to be a scorcher of a day, so I'm glad I bought some lighter clothes to put on a bit later on because it's going to be warm.
Yeah, and you need your sunblock and a big cap. We can't have you getting burnt.
Well, us gingers always come prepared. I've got plenty of sunblock and a nice big hat.
Good. Hey, I've read your op-ed in the Herald this morning about partnership. You know, why partnership will shape Aotearoa's future. This is about the Crown's relationship with Māori, our relationship with each other. Will that relationship involve co-governance under Labour?
Well, there's a lot of co-governance already. Some of the biggest co-governance arrangements that we've got in place in New Zealand were set up by the national government of John Key. So if we think about the co-governance around the Waikato River, the Wanganui River, Te Urewera National Park, these are all long-standing arrangements. I've got no intention of changing those.
Will we get more of those under a Hipkins government?
Well, they've typically been entered into as part of treaty settlements, and I don't intend to change that process. I don't know what the current government are negotiating with iwi around settlements. There are still some outstanding settlements that are being negotiated. If they're negotiating co-governance arrangements as part of that, then I don't intend to change that.
As part of this partnership drive that you're writing about today, is there a role for references to the treaty in legislation?
Well, there's already a lot of references to the treaty in legislation, and so yes, I think there is. That's been long-standing. The treaty's been in legislation, across New Zealand's laws for decades.
And you wouldn't be wanting to change any of that?
Well, I think when you change that, you run the risk that you actually open up a whole lot of new potential issues that the government will then have to work through. And in many cases, things are settled. So why turn them upside down if they're already settled?
New Zealand First is doing exactly that, removing or changing 28 general treaty clauses across legislation. Are you saying you would reverse those to stop the bad outcomes you've just described?
We've yet to see the detail of that. They've talked a lot about it, but we've yet to see the detail of what they're proposing. I think it will be potentially very, very risky for any government to go down that road because it's going to open up a whole lot of potential litigation, a whole lot of risk, a whole lot of uncertainty, and that's not just going to affect Māori, that's going to affect everybody.
Given what you are saying today, what you have written today, would you rule out ever allowing that to happen while you're in power?
It's just clearly not something that the Labour Party would ever support. We're certainly not going to be supporting the unilateral rewrite that New Zealand First is proposing.
Okay.
I actually think that would be irresponsible for any government to do that, because when you do a wholesale rewrite of so many different laws, and potentially so quickly, given that they've now only got between now and the end of the year to actually do it, doing that is going to throw up a whole lot of things that are unintended, and I suspect will leave a whole lot of things to be resolved in court. Responsible governments don't deliberately open up all of that risk.
Okay, good to know. You've drawn quite a clear line in the sand on that one. What's this announcement today, Chippy, as I understand it, the Greens are doing an announcement with Te Pāti Māori. You're doing a stand-up with both of the parties. Can you just tell us what's happening?
I think you don't want to read too much into that. We are going to be doing a media conference with the Greens that'll be joint, but it'll either be today or tomorrow. I think there's some travel logistics, which means it may need to be rescheduled. But ultimately, it's just us saying, look, when it comes to the working relationship between Labour and the Greens, we can work constructively together in opposition, which is what we've been doing for the last 2.5 years. We can air our differences whilst still having a good working relationship with one another, unlike the current government, who seem to think that every time they disagree, they have to start attacking each other.
So the stand-up or the press conference is just you and the Greens, not Te Pāti Māori, even though it's Waitangi. Why aren't you including them?
Well, Te Pāti Māori, as I said last year, have got some issues of their own to work through before they're in any position to be working with others. They need to demonstrate they can work with each other, and then I think they could have conversations about working with other people.
Fair enough. But the people that you're working with and having a presser with today, the Greens, they're having a presser with Te Pāti Māori. So by extension, you're quite intertwined, aren't you?
Well, those are questions for them. The Labour Party's had a very constructive working relationship with the Greens over the last 2.5 years in opposition, and for a long period before that in government, and then before that in opposition, and before that in government. And I hope that we'll continue to have that constructive working relationship. Before the election, I'll set out which parties we've got areas in common with, which areas Labor just wouldn't go, things that other parties are proposing that we simply wouldn't agree to, and I'll set all that out. Now, parties are only just starting to set out their election manifestos, and so we need to let that process run its course. And bearing in mind, ultimately voters determine the makeup of the next parliament, not politicians.
Is there any room for Chloe Swarbrick in the cabinet?
Oh, I think that's all very, very premature. I think you have to win votes before you start giving people jobs. And my focus over the next, what are we left, 8, 9 months, 10 months, is to make sure that I'm getting as many votes for Labor as possible.
What about this idea, you mentioned people need to vote first. The party that gets the most votes, the biggest party, do you think they have a kind of a moral right to be forming a government over other smaller parties, or under MMP actually it's irrelevant?
The nature of MMP means that the party, the person, in our case in New Zealand, it's the person who can go to the Governor General and say, I can form a majority government in Parliament, is the person who ends up becoming the Prime Minister. And that being the leader of the largest party certainly gives you a head start in that, but it is no guarantee. And we've seen a situation previously where, and I was part of that, Jacinda Ardern wasn't leading the largest party but formed the government. And that is a legitimate MMP outcome.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Hey, very quickly before we go, Sam Stubbs has written an interesting piece today about the flat housing market. We're going to have a flat housing market for a very long time. ANZ last week came out and lowered their house price growth forecast. We are going to have flatter property prices for a longer period of time. What does that do to your capital gains tax if there are no capital gains? And do you need to tax more if that's the case?
Well, flatter property house prices is ultimately going to be a good thing for New Zealanders, and particularly for first home buyers. One of the goals of our capital gains tax proposal is to actually shift investment out of the speculative housing market and into productive investments. And if potential investors in the housing market see that they're not going to get the same returns from speculating in the housing market as they have previously, and put their money elsewhere instead, that's a good outcome. In terms of the revenue projections that the capital gains tax is based on, we've been very, very conservative in that. So we've already assumed a relatively low rate of property price growth in that. And of course, we've also assumed a number of other things that are, I think it was about 3% over over a long period of time. It's been very conservatively calculated.
Okay, and if you don't, because we all want our free, even the billionaires are going to get their free 3 GP visits. Would you, if you had to, you weren't getting enough money out of the housing market because the prices are flat, would you cut back the policy or would you increase the tax to make it work?
We'll set out a fiscal plan closer to the election, which will show how we would balance the government's budget, something that Nicola Willis has yet to succeed in doing. She took a budget that was going to be balanced and took it into a state where it's never going to be balanced into the future under the current Treasury projection.
All right, so TBC.
We'll set out how we would balance. We would set out how we would balance the budget, bearing in mind that if property prices don't increase, that's probably going to throw out a number of the other government projections, including things like other revenue projections for government. And every government has to make adjustments on the basis of that.
All right, Chris, appreciate your time this morning. Go and get that big hat and sunblock on you before the sun gets too intense.